There comes a moment in life, quiet, subtle, almost unnoticeable, when you sit with yourself long enough to finally hear the truth you've been avoiding. The truth that every time you downplayed your own feelings to make someone else comfortable, every time you swallowed your voice while something inside you was quietly breaking, every time you let people take more from you than you had the strength to give, you weren't being generous, you were abandoning yourself. And this never arrives all at once. It happens slowly, quietly, over years, in tiny moments that pretend to be harmless. Letting someone cross your boundaries because you don't want to seem difficult. Accepting disrespect because you fear losing the connection. Giving far more than you ever receive. Because, deep down, you're afraid that if you stop, everything will fall apart. But eventually, in the quiet honesty of your own mind, you begin to see that no connection on this earth is worth losing your inner stability for. Not love, not family, not belonging, not the illusion of peace that only exists when you're the one carrying the entire weight, and as this realization slowly finds its place in your chest, something within you begins to shift, not loudly, not dramatically, but gently, steadily, like the slow straightening of something that has been bent for far too long. You start to realize that your self-worth isn't an accessory you put on during good days. It is the lens through which your entire life flows, the people you allow near, the treatment you accept, the energy you exchange. Everything rises or falls depending on how deeply you value yourself. And once you understand that your peace is the core of your being, the foundation of your clarity, your choices, your relationships, you stop letting anyone walk through your life with muddy shoes. You start choosing yourself in ways that feel new, unfamiliar, but unmistakably right. And with that awareness begins the first truth, the one that quietly shapes the course of your life. 1. Your self-worth sets the standard for every relationship. When you begin to observe your relationships with calm honesty, you notice something you once overlooked. People respond to the value you place on yourself long before they ever respond to the value you place on them. It isn't arrogance, it isn't ego, it's simply the quiet architecture of human behavior, the unspoken rules that determine who stays, who leaves, and how deeply they enter your world. When your self-worth is low, your boundaries soften. Your voice weakens, your expectations shrink, and suddenly you're accepting versions of love and attention that do not reflect your true self. You tolerate inconsistency because you crave connection. You excuse disrespect because you want harmony. You carry emotional weight because you want peace. And without realizing it, you begin living at a discount, offering your depth at a price that diminishes its true value. But a shift occurs the moment you understand that your worth is not measured by how much you can endure. It's measured by how gently you guard the parts of yourself the world has carelessly taken for granted. You start seeing the difference between presence and convenience, affection and attachment, connection and dependency. You become aware of how your body reacts around certain people, how some create tension while others bring ease, how some drain you while others steady you. And slowly, with a softness that doesn't need validation, you begin to accept that you are allowed to want more clarity, more honesty, more effort, more reciprocity, more respect, not because you are demanding, but because you were never meant to survive on the scraps of someone else's emotional capacity. Your self-worth becomes the quiet compass guiding you. It reshapes your voice, steady, grounded. It reshapes your choices. You stop moving toward people who offer only fragments of themselves. It reshapes your presence. You stand taller, more aware, unwilling to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. You learn that protecting your worth doesn't mean becoming cold, it means becoming conscious of the truth that your time, your energy, your heart, these are sacred, finite, and not everyone deserves access to them. And when this shift happens, people feel it before you ever speak it. They sense that your boundaries are no longer negotiable. They sense that your kindness is no longer something they can lean on without offering anything back. They sense that the old version of you, the one who tolerated too much, is gone, replaced by someone who knows their value in a quiet, steady, unshakable way. Before moving forward, ask yourself with honesty and gentleness, if I valued myself the way I truly deserve, what behaviors would I stop accepting immediately? Sit with that question. Let it reveal what you've ignored. Let it show you the doorway to a different life, because perhaps this moment is where everything finally begins to change. 2. Protecting your inner peace is not selfish, it's survival. There comes a point where you finally understand that peace is not something you wait for, nor something you stumble into when life happens to be soft with you. Peace is something you build, something you guard, something you choose even when everything around you tries to drag you back into the noise you fought so hard to escape. And what's surprising is that this understanding doesn't appear in a moment of strength. It arrives in a moment of exhaustion, the deep kind that settles into your bones after years of showing up for people who rarely show up for you, after carrying burdens that were never yours, after silencing your needs so often that you forget what it feels like to hear your own voice. Peace never announces itself, but the lack of it always does. In the heaviness you wake up with, in the tension you've started to believe is normal, in the way your heart beats just a little faster around certain people. Because you don't feel safe being fully human in their presence. And slowly, as you begin paying attention to these subtle signals, the tightness in your chest, the forced laugh, the conversations that leave you drained instead of understood, you begin to see that protecting your peace has never been selfish. It has always been survival. It is the understanding that your mind is the home you live in every single day, and no relationship, no obligation, no connection is worth turning that home into a battlefield. You start to notice how the world has conditioned you to feel guilty for choosing yourself, as if your well-being should always come second to someone else's expectations. But in the quiet spaces of your life, a simple truth rises. When you lose your peace, you lose yourself. And when you lose yourself, everything else in your life begins to unravel. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always label your peace as selfish. They will call your distance disrespect. They will call your clarity attitude. But none of these reactions speak to who you are. They reveal the comfort they once felt when you were carrying more than your share. And when you stop overextending yourself, the entire dynamic changes in a way that forces the truth to surface. The relationships held together only by your effort begin to fall apart, and the relationships rooted in mutual respect start to grow stronger. You begin to notice who honors your silence, who understands your boundaries, who supports your growth even when it means they no longer have the same level of access to you. Protecting your peace creates a new kind of gravity in your life, pulling you towards spaces where your nervous system feels safe, where your presence is appreciated, where your emotions are not dismissed, where your vulnerability is handled with care. And it pushes you away from chaos, away from unpredictability, away from conversations that feel like emotional landmines. You start to sense, almost instinctively, that peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of alignment. Alignment with who you are, what you value, and what you refuse to tolerate anymore. And the beauty of this shift is that it doesn't require dramatic decisions. It starts in small moments, choosing silence instead of arguing with someone who hears only themselves, choosing distance instead of forcing connection, choosing rest instead of proving your worth through exhaustion, choosing truth instead of maintaining an image that exists only to keep others comfortable. You begin building a life around what steadies you, not what drains you. And the more you protect that inner space, the more natural it becomes to say no, without guilt, to let go without fear, to walk away without anger. Before moving to the next truth, take a quiet, honest moment with yourself and ask, how many times have I sacrificed my peace just to keep someone else comfortable? Let the answer rise, not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself, because understanding becomes the doorway to healing. And here is the shift that begins to rewrite everything inside you. If something threatens the stability of your inner world, then you owe it to yourself to step back, breathe, and protect your peace before you protect anyone else's expectations of you. And that single decision may be the beginning of a life where for the first time you finally feel at home within yourself. 3. Stop overgiving to people who undergive. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from long days or physical effort, but from giving more than your heart can sustain to people who show up only when it benefits them. It is the exhaustion that builds slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, because overgiving rarely feels wrong at first. It feels generous, it feels kind, it feels like proof that you are a good person, someone who cares deeply, someone who holds others gently even when the world has been harsh to them. But as the years pass, you begin to notice a pattern you once ignored. The more you give, the less certain people offer in return. Not because they don't understand your effort, but because they have grown comfortable expecting you to carry the weight while they simply receive. And the truth is, most people who undergive are not intentionally cruel. They've simply learned that you will always be there, always forgiving, always understanding, always the one who adjusts, who stretches, who bends your boundaries to keep the peace. In their minds, your effort is endless. Your patience is guaranteed. Your energy is renewable. But it isn't. Every time you silence your own needs just to preserve a bond, every time you give more than your heart can afford, every time you stretch yourself to fill the emotional gaps someone else refuses to close, you chip away at yourself, not in dramatic ways, but in small, steady fragments until a part of you begins to feel small inside your own life. The imbalance begins revealing itself in quiet, subtle ways. You find yourself checking on people who never check on you. You remember the details of their struggles while they forget the details of your own. You show up with sincerity while they show up only when it's convenient. You invest your emotional currency like it has no limit, while they treat your presence as something that requires no effort at all. And the pain doesn't lie in the imbalance itself. It lies in the moment you realize you've been holding a relationship together on your own, convincing yourself it was mutual simply because you wanted it to be. Overgiving reshapes the way you see yourself. It makes you believe your worth is defined by what you offer rather than who you are. Instead of asking, are they giving to me too? You ask, am I giving enough? Instead of noticing the absence of reciprocity, you tell yourself you simply need to try harder. Instead of recognizing the unfairness, you convince yourself that more patience will eventually create balance. But imbalance doesn't fix itself through effort, it fixes itself through awareness. And that awareness arrives gently, the way early morning light slides into a dark room through the smallest opening. You start to feel discomfort in your body. When someone asks for more than they ever return, you start to notice the tension in your chest when you realize your emotional availability has become a resource someone uses without gratitude. You begin to sense that a relationship built on your constant giving is not love, it is emotional dependency, and the dependency isn't yours. When you finally begin to value yourself, something powerful shifts. You stop giving by default. You pause, you observe, you begin asking whether the effort is mutual, whether the connection is balanced, whether the relationship nourishes you or drains you, and in that brief pause, the truth emerges: not everyone deserves the level of care you offer so naturally. Not everyone knows how to carry the weight of your sincerity. Not everyone has the capacity to meet you where you have been meeting them alone. Pulling back is not punishment. It is clarity. It is the recognition that your heart is not an endless reservoir of second chances, reassurances, and emotional labor. It is choosing to give where your giving is met with presence, not where it disappears into silence. It is understanding that love, real love, requires two people showing up, not one person giving until they collapse. So before moving forward, give yourself a quiet moment to sit with a single question. If I stopped overgiving today, who would still remain in my life? The answer may not feel comfortable, but it will always be honest. And here is the shift that frees you from the cycle. If you notice yourself giving more than you receive, choose to step back gently, not from anger but from respect for the parts of you that deserve reciprocity. And maybe this becomes the moment you learn that your heart grows lighter, not when you give more, but when you give with intention to those who meet you with the same quiet depth you offer them. 4. Your time, energy, and attention are currency. Spend them wisely. There comes a moment when you begin to understand that the most valuable things you possess are not material, not visible, not measurable by anyone else. They are the unseen currencies that shape your entire experience of life: your time, your energy, and your attention. These three elements determine the quality of your relationships, the direction of your growth, and the state of your inner world. And yet for years, you may have offered them freely to anyone who reached for them, almost automatically, without stopping to consider whether they deserved that access or whether their presence added anything meaningful in return. It's only when you feel drained, scattered, or strangely disconnected from yourself that you begin to realize how much of your inner wealth you've given away without intention. Time is the one currency you will never earn back. Once spent, it leaves a mark, shaping the life you are quietly building in the background. But most people don't feel the weight of wasted time until years have passed, until they look back and see how many hours, days, even entire seasons of their lives were poured into conversations that led nowhere, into relationships that never deepened, into people who never cared enough to listen with depth or show up with consistency. And as you grow older, something inside you begins to shift. You begin valuing the hours you have because you finally understand that a lifetime is not endless. And whatever you give your time to, you give your life to. Energy is even more delicate. It's the inner force that determines whether you wake up feeling grounded or exhausted, whether you move through the day with clarity or heaviness, whether your heart feels spacious enough to expand or compressed beneath obligations that were never yours in the first place. You start to realize that the people who drain your energy rarely apologize because they never felt the weight you were carrying for them. They only felt your availability. Meanwhile, the people who nourish your energy make you feel lighter without even trying. Their presence feels like stepping into a room with more oxygen than the one you just left. And it's in the contrast between these two experiences that you begin to understand how sacred your energy is and how essential it is to offer it intentionally instead of instinctively. Then there is your attention, perhaps the most underestimated currency of all. Whatever you focus on grows within you. If you give your attention to negativity, chaos, or people who constantly pull you into emotional turbulence, your inner world reflects that chaos back to you. If you give your attention to conversations that uplift you, to habits that strengthen you, to relationships that steady you, your inner world becomes a place where you finally feel calm, capable, and whole. Attention is not passive. It is the most active force shaping your reality. And the moment you start directing it with greater awareness, everything in your life begins to move in a different, more aligned direction. As these pieces connect within you, something steady begins to form, a deeper sense of responsibility for your inner resources. You realize that not everyone deserves your time, because not everyone values it. Not everyone deserves your energy, because not everyone protects it. Not everyone deserves your attention, because not everyone respects the impact it has on your life. And this realization is not cold or harsh, it is compassionate, because it teaches you to build a life that honors your well-being instead of sacrificing it. You begin to slow down, you begin to choose with care, you begin to notice the difference between people who leave you centered and people who leave you scattered. You start investing in fewer things but with more intention. You no longer respond to every message the moment it arrives. You stop saying yes to every invitation. You no longer carry conversations that feel forced or one-sided. You replace urgency with presence, chaos with clarity, and emotional noise with stillness. And in this new rhythm of living, something beautiful unfolds. The right people begin to rise toward you. People who respect your boundaries instead of testing them. People who appreciate your time rather than wasting it. People who value your energy because they can feel the sincerity behind it. People who listen not only with their ears but with the fullness of their awareness. People who show up with the same depth and intentionality that you offer. Before moving forward, ask yourself quietly, without pressure or judgment, where have I been spending my inner currency on people or situations that never deserved it? Let the answers surface gently, because honesty is the first step in reclaiming your life. And here is the shift that begins restoring your balance. If something costs you your peace, your clarity, or your emotional strength, then you must question whether it deserves your time, your energy, or your attention at all. And maybe this is how you begin building a life where your inner world finally feels like a place worth living in. 5. Walk away from anything that requires you to lose yourself. There comes a moment in every person's life when they find themselves standing at a quiet crossroads. Not because someone pushed them there, but because their soul can no longer bear the weight of being only half of who they are. It's a moment that doesn't announce itself with noise or chaos, but with a subtle tightening in the chest, a feeling that something in your life is demanding far more than it should, asking you to shrink more than you can, stand, or pulling you so far away from your real self that you hardly recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. And as uncomfortable as that realization is, it marks the beginning of your return to yourself. Because anything that requires you to abandon your identity, silence your truth, or dim the light within you is not love, not loyalty, and not a place meant for your spirit to rest. Losing yourself never happens in one dramatic moment. It happens in a series of small choices, the ones that seem harmless at first. You stop sharing your opinions because someone constantly dismisses them. You stop showing your emotions because someone makes you feel too sensitive. You stop dreaming out loud because someone calls your dreams unrealistic. You stop defending your own boundaries because every confrontation drains you. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, you start shifting pieces of yourself, and then even more, until the version you live as feels like a carefully edited shadow of who you were meant to be. But eventually, often in a quiet moment with no audience, you begin to feel the weight of this gradual disappearance. You feel it when you sit alone and realize how far you've drifted from your core values. You feel it when you notice how much of your energy is spent maintaining peace while sacrificing your own. You feel it when your laughter no longer sounds like it belongs to you. You feel it in the heaviness that settles into your body long before your mind admits the truth. And the truth is clear, even if it stings. Anything that demands you shrink your identity just to be accepted is not a place of safety. It's a place where your spirit erodes piece by piece. Walking away isn't an act of rejection. It's an act of remembering who you were before you softened yourself to fit into someone else's comfort. Before you traded your real self for the illusion of acceptance. Before you hid your needs because you were taught they were excessive. Walking away doesn't make you distant or harsh. It makes you whole again. It's the moment you decide your voice matters, your peace matters, your dreams matter, your limits matter, and your existence is not negotiable in exchange for approval. Some people won't welcome this shift. They'll say you've changed, as if transformation is disloyalty. They call you distant, as if distance isn't sometimes required for breathing. They'll call you difficult, as if difficulty isn't often another word for self-respect. What they're really responding to is their loss of access to the version of you who overgave, overallowed, and underspoke. When you finally choose yourself, the dynamic changes, and not everyone is meant to follow you into your next chapter. But the beauty of this evolution is that it doesn't need anger, only clarity. Clarity that says, if closeness to someone demands losing parts of myself, then that closeness is not a blessing. It is a cost I am no longer willing to pay. You start understanding that your life expands when you expand. Your future becomes stronger when you become stronger. And the relationships meant for you will never require your disappearance as the entry fee. So give yourself a moment, quiet, gentle, and ask without fear, where have I been trading my identity for connection? And what would unfold if I move toward the version of myself I've been suppressing? Allow the question to breathe. Let it open the door to the truth you've avoided. Because here lies the shift that mends the fracture between who you are and who you pretended to be. If any relationship requires me to abandon myself, then I choose distance over distortion, truth over silence, and authenticity over approval, every single time. And maybe this is the moment you finally see that walking away isn't an ending. It's the beginning of returning home to yourself. 6. Emotional independence makes you unshakable. There is a quiet kind of strength that doesn't reveal itself in your tone or in the way you enter a room, but in the steady calm anchored deep within your chest, a calm that stays even when life becomes overwhelming, even when people fail you, even when circumstances threaten to pull the ground from under your feet. That calm is emotional independence. It's the capacity to feel intensely without letting emotions rule you, to care without collapsing, to love without dissolving yourself, to stand alone without feeling deserted. It isn't coldness, it isn't disconnection, it isn't numbness. It's the gentle recognition that your emotional balance is your responsibility, your home base, your foundation in a world that can shift in an instant. For years, you may have built your emotional world around other people, their reactions, their approvals, their presence, their reassurance. You may have thought your peace depended on someone else's reliability, your happiness on someone else's attention, your worth on someone else's validation, and because of that, your inner world became fragile, easily shaken, easily pierced. A single message left unanswered could shift your entire mood. A slight change in someone's tone could unsettle your whole day. A moment of distance from someone you cared about could tighten your chest in ways you couldn't explain. You didn't realize it then, but you had handed your emotional stability to people who were never meant to carry that weight. But the moment you begin taking back that emotional independence, something profound starts shifting inside you. You begin to grasp that the stability you've been searching for in others is something that has to be built within. You start finding ease in your own presence. You learn to breathe through discomfort instead of fleeing from it. You begin trusting your instincts instead of waiting for someone else to give you permission. You notice that you can feel fear without shutting down, sadness without crumbling, love without losing direction. You start discovering that everything you once chased, reassurance, grounding, clarity, validation, already lives within you when you create enough quiet to hear your own voice. This transformation doesn't harden you. It softens you, but in a way that is steady and safe. It allows you to love without the fear of being shattered. It lets you support others without drowning in their emotional waves. It keeps you connected without becoming dependent. It builds an inner safety strong enough for you to show up authentically, not because you need someone to complete you, but because you simply want to share the fullness you've found within yourself. Emotional independence releases you from the chaos of other people's unpredictability. When someone pulls away, you don't fall apart, you observe. When someone criticizes you unfairly, you don't absorb their voice, you return to your own. When someone leaves, you don't lose your center. You stay grounded because your foundation was never built upon them to begin with. You stop reacting out of old wounds. You begin responding with intention. You stop allowing others to determine your worth. You begin defining it through your choices, your boundaries, your clarity. Your understanding of relationships shifts too. They're no longer your survival line, they become shared paths. You don't cling out of fear or stay out of emotional dependency. You choose connection because it nourishes you, not because it saves you. And because of this, your relationships grow calmer, richer, healthier. The people who remain in your life are there not to fill emotional gaps, but to add to the wholeness you've already built inside. Before moving forward, ask yourself gently and honestly, have I been expecting others to hold emotional weight that was always mine to carry? Let that question rest within you, not for blame, but for understanding. And here is the shift that frees you from emotional dependency. If I notice myself leaning too heavily on someone else to regulate my emotions, I choose to pause, return to myself, and rebuild the stability that was always meant to come from within. And maybe this is the moment you finally understand that emotional independence is not distance, it is freedom. It is the ability to walk through life with a calm, grounded heart that no storm can completely break. 7. Respect yourself enough to say no without explaining. There comes a moment in your life when you begin to understand that the word no is not a barrier, not a blade, not a rejection of closeness or affection. It becomes a quiet statement of self-respect, a boundary drawn not to distance yourself from others, but to keep yourself from dissolving under the weight of expectations that were never meant to be yours. For years you may have said yes out of politeness, out of guilt, out of fear that someone might misinterpret your intention or question your loyalty. You may have stretched yourself thin, shuffled your plans, silenced your own needs, and sacrificed your peace simply because saying no felt uncomfortable, felt almost like wrongdoing. And every time you felt a slight disconnection from your own truth, a sense that your life no longer reflected what you deeply wanted or needed. But as you grow more aware of yourself, you begin noticing that every misaligned yes leaves a mark. It drains your time, your emotional strength, your clarity, your stability. It creates resentment where calm should have lived. It builds invisible tension that eventually turns into exhaustion. You start realizing that saying yes when every part of you wants to say no isn't kindness. It's a slow surrender of your own self. And the difficulty lies in the fact that society often praises people who are endlessly available, endlessly agreeable, endlessly adaptable. But beneath that praise is a quieter truth. The more you avoid saying no, the more others learn to expect your availability without ever considering your well-being. Then something inside you begins to shift, not abruptly, but softly, like a small door unlocking inside your chest. You realize your boundaries don't require explanations to be legitimate. You recognize that saying no isn't the action of a selfish heart, but the expression of a person who finally understands their own value. You understand that you owe no one a justification for protecting your peace, your time, your emotional space, or your energy. Respecting yourself means trusting your inner signals, the heaviness you feel when something isn't right, the resistance in your body, the quiet whisper that says you're giving too much. You begin honoring those signals, not ignoring them. And the beauty of this shift is that you don't become unkind or detached. You become truthful. You start choosing commitments that match your capacity instead of others' expectations. You give your time to people who genuinely respect it. You say no in moments where a younger version of you would have pushed down their discomfort just to avoid disappointing someone else. And then something you've forgotten returns to your life. Spaciousness, room to breathe, room to rest, room to exist without drowning in obligations that were never meant for you. People may react, some will be confused, some will be offended, some may use guilt to pull you back into old patterns, not out of care for you but because your boundaries interrupt the convenience they once enjoyed. But their reactions are not a reflection of your worth. They are reflections of the dynamics your constant yes once maintained. When you stop being the person who always agrees, the balance shifts, and not everyone will know how to handle the version of you who finally honors themselves. Yet the more you practice saying no without elaborating, the more grounded you become. You begin living inside your own life rather than being pulled in every direction. You make decisions from truth instead of pressure. You stop allowing other people's urgency to dictate your actions. And slowly, you build a life shaped by your values rather than your fears. Before you continue, pause quietly and ask yourself with complete honesty, how many times have I said yes just to avoid discomfort, even though saying no would have protected my peace? Let the answer rise gently. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. And here is the shift that reshapes your sense of self-respect. If a situation requires me to betray my needs in order to say yes, then I choose to say no, clearly, calmly, and without explanation. And maybe this is the moment you finally understand that your no is not a barrier. It is the doorway to a life built on authenticity instead of obligation. 8. Don't settle for half love, half attention, or half effort. There comes a moment, usually after years of twisting your heart into shapes it was never designed to hold, when you begin to see that accepting half of what you need slowly convinces your soul that you are only worthy of half of what you deserve. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens silently, in tiny compromises that seem harmless. In the moments when you say it's okay even though it hurts, in the conversations where you swallow your needs to avoid tension, in the times when you accept inconsistent effort because you fear that asking for more will make you lose the small pieces you're receiving. And without noticing, you start surviving on emotional leftovers, persuading yourself that fragments of affection are enough to build a life with. But half love is not love. Half attention is not connection. Half effort is not commitment. These things may resemble something real on the surface, especially when you're lonely or craving warmth, but they never offer your heart the safety, depth, or steady foundation it needs to grow. When someone gives you only half of themselves, you end up giving twice as much just to keep the connection alive. You overextend, you overthink, you overgive, not because you truly want to, but because you feel like you must. And slowly the balance shifts until you're carrying the entire relationship while they simply remain present inside it. What makes this even more painful is that your heart recognizes the truth long before your mind can accept it. You feel it in the uncertainty that fills your chest when their effort begins to fade. You feel it in the silence that sits between you after they vanish for days. You feel it in the tension in your body when you hope for more but receive the same bare minimum presence you've been tolerating for months. And still you stay, not because the situation nurtures you, but because a part of you fears that asking for real, full love will leave you with none at all. But something shifts the moment you finally admit that you cannot keep pouring your whole heart into a space that was never built to hold it. You begin to understand that you were never meant to earn love through effort, never meant to chase attention as if it were a scarce prize, never meant to settle for a version of someone that exists only in possibility. You realize that wanting deeper connection doesn't make you demanding. It makes you human. Wanting consistency doesn't make you needy. It makes you emotionally attuned. Wanting mutual effort doesn't make you difficult. It makes you self-respecting. As this awareness grows, you begin to feel the weight of your own worth settling back into its rightful place. You stop confusing inconsistency for depth. You stop treating mixed signals as something you must interpret. You stop believing that waiting long enough will change someone who has no intention of showing up any differently. Instead, you begin recognizing that the love you accept becomes the love you subconsciously believe you deserve. And that belief influences every relationship that comes next. And the more you recognize your value, the less tolerance you have for half-hearted effort. You begin to prefer honest distance over pretend closeness. You start noticing the difference between someone who reaches for you because they care and someone who reaches for you simply because they know you'll always be there. You begin building a life where the relationships around you feel whole, not because they're flawless, but because they're mutual. Before moving forward, give yourself a quiet moment to ask, where in my life have I convinced myself that half effort is better than no effort at all? Not to judge yourself, but to finally see the truth you've been avoiding. And here is the shift that restores your emotional balance. If someone offers me only fragments of their presence, their time, or their heart, then I choose to step back and make room for the full love, full attention, and full effort I know I am worthy of. And maybe this is the moment you begin to understand that settling for half of anything teaches the world to give you less, but claiming your worth teaches the world to rise to meet you. 9. Eliminate chaos, confusion, and emotional games from your life. There comes a point when you begin to recognize that chaos isn't always loud, confusion isn't always unintentional, and emotional games aren't always played with obvious moves. Sometimes chaos shows up as someone whose presence constantly disrupts your inner world, someone whose actions never match their words, someone who turns every connection into a puzzle you're expected to solve while they remain safely distant, and because their disruption comes in waves, closeness followed by withdrawal, warmth followed by coldness, promises followed by silence, you find yourself caught in a cycle that keeps you emotionally unsettled, waiting for clarity that never arrives and questioning yourself more than the behavior that caused the instability. Confusion becomes a rhythm you unknowingly adapt to. You replay conversations in your mind, trying to figure out what shifted. You analyze texts, pauses, tone changes, and reactions as if decoding them will bring you peace. You become overly cautious with your words, trying not to trigger another emotional shift. And without noticing, the foundation beneath you becomes unstable. You wake up wondering which version of them will appear today. You go to sleep wondering if you did something wrong. You begin navigating your own emotions as if you're in a tight hallway, holding your breath so you don't disturb the fragile illusion of peace that exists only when you silence your truth. But the moment you begin valuing your peace, something inside you becomes more alert, not in a fragile way, but in a wise way. You start sensing the difference between relationships that feel like home and relationships that feel like unpredictable weather. You discover that chaos isn't passion, inconsistency isn't depth, and emotional games aren't intimacy. You realize that people who truly love you won't leave you guessing. They won't make you compete for their attention. They won't weaponize silence or affection. They won't shift your reality to keep you off balance. Love in its healthiest form steadies you. Presence in its truest form grounds you. People who genuinely care for your well-being don't create storms in your mind and call it complexity. They show up with clarity that feels like sunlight after years of fog. As this awareness expands, you begin hearing the quiet signals your body sends you. The tightness in your shoulders when someone's name flashes on your screen. The unease that lingers after a vague message. The sudden flood of overthinking triggered by a half-answer or delayed reply. And instead of explaining these reactions away or convincing yourself they aren't real, you begin to listen. You start trusting the wisdom embedded in your discomfort. You begin noticing that chaos is never a sign of depth. It is a signal of misalignment. Confusion is not something to normalize. It is a warning that your heart is not safe here. Emotional games flourish only where self-worth is fragile. But the moment you strengthen your own sense of value, these games lose their power. You stop decoding mixed signals because you no longer accept them. You stop chasing clarity from someone who thrives on keeping you unsure. You stop tolerating inconsistency because you understand that emotional stability is not a luxury, it is a baseline requirement for a healthy heart. And the more you invest in your own peace, the lower your tolerance becomes for anyone who disrupts it, drains it, or tests it unnecessarily. Before moving forward, grant yourself a quiet, honest moment to ask, who in my life benefits from keeping me uncertain, and how would my life change if I stepped away from their chaos? Let the answer settle naturally, for truth often whispers long before we are ready to hear it. And here is the shift that begins reshaping your inner landscape. If someone repeatedly injects chaos, confusion, or emotional instability into my life, then I choose to create distance without waiting for a final explanation. Because peace is clarity, and anything that destroys peace is never mine to carry. Perhaps this is the moment when you realize that removing chaos is not a loss. It is liberation. It is the reclaiming of your mind and heart, a return to a place where you can finally breathe freely. 10. Choose yourself every time. You are the longest commitment you will ever make. There comes a moment, usually after years of trying to be everything for everyone, when you realize with a mixture of quiet clarity and tender sadness that the person you have consistently neglected in favor of others' comfort, connection, or expectations is yourself. And in that still, unassuming moment, Everything within you begins to shift because choosing yourself is not turning away from others. It is finally turning toward the parts of you that have been waiting years to be acknowledged, nurtured, protected, and valued. It is understanding that you are the only person who will walk with you from your first breath to your last, and that every commitment you make in life begins with the commitment you make to your own well-being. For years, you may have believed that choosing yourself was selfish, that your needs should come last, that your emotions should be silenced, that your boundaries should bend, that your dreams should wait in order to maintain harmony. You prioritized the comfort of others because you feared that honoring your truth would create distance, tension, or misunderstanding, and in the process you shrank quietly, subtly, until parts of yourself became unrecognizable even to you. You gave so much of your time, energy, heart, patience, and forgiveness that you forgot to ask, what do I want? What do I need? Who am I becoming? But as your awareness grows, you begin to understand that choosing yourself is not abandonment. It is alignment. It is recognizing that you cannot give from emptiness, cannot nurture meaningful relationships while neglecting the relationship you have with yourself, cannot build a life of depth and fulfillment while disconnected from your own desires. And as this realization settles into your soul, you notice profound changes in your life when you consistently choose yourself rather than hesitate. Your boundaries become clearer, not harsher. Your decisions become calmer, not colder. Your voice becomes steadier, not louder. You move through the world grounded, knowing that your worth is no longer outsourced to anyone else's approval or acceptance. Choosing yourself means listening to your inner signals, the heaviness that warns you, the discomfort that alerts you, the longing that guides you, the quiet intuition that whispers when something is right or wrong. It means trusting your own judgment even when others disagree because only you inhabit your life. It means walking away from situations that drain you even when your heart is attached. It means saying yes to experiences, relationships, and opportunities that expand you rather than diminish you. It means understanding that your peace is non-negotiable, your well-being is essential, and your identity is not a commodity to be traded for acceptance. Some may not understand this transformation, some may question it, some may resist it, some may demand the version of you that tolerated more than they deserved. But the beauty of choosing yourself is that you no longer collapse under their reactions. You no longer define yourself by their comfort or discomfort. You no longer shape your life according to their expectations. You begin living from a place of inner truth, and that truth becomes the compass guiding you toward the relationships and environments that nurture growth without erasing who you are. Before concluding this journey, allow yourself to sit with one final, powerful question. If I treated myself like someone I am committed to for the rest of my life, what would I stop accepting today? Let the question settle deeply. Let it echo. Let it guide you to the version of yourself who has been waiting patiently to be chosen. Here is the shift that completes everything you have learned so far. If honoring myself disappoints others, then I choose myself, not from defiance, but from love for the life I am still becoming. And perhaps this is the moment when you finally understand that choosing yourself is not the end of anything valuable, it is the beginning of everything meaningful. There is a quiet understanding that emerges at the end of a journey like this, not one of fanfare or noise, but one that settles within you slowly, like soft light, filling a room you didn't realize had been dark for so long. As you move through these truths, one by one, something awakens inside. A clarity you may have been seeking without knowing where to look. You start to see that everything you desire, peace, strength, stability, belonging, begins with how you treat yourself, the words you speak to yourself, and the ways you honor your own needs. Even when the world pulls you in 100 directions at once, you realize that life doesn't fall apart when you set boundaries. Relationships don't crumble when you choose honesty. Your worth doesn't diminish when others fail to recognize it. What truly falls apart are the illusions, that you must give endlessly to be loved, that you must endure chaos to remain connected, that you must accept half effort because it's better than nothing. that you must cling to people who were never holding you. Once those illusions dissolve, what remains is far more honest, the beginning of your return to yourself. As you sit quietly with these lessons, you may feel a blend of sadness and relief. Sadness for the years spent abandoning your own heart, relief for the path that now stretches before you. And that mixture is natural, the emotional proof of growth, the evidence that you are seeing yourself with a gentleness once reserved only for others. And perhaps, just perhaps, you realize that choosing yourself doesn't mean closing your heart to the world. It means finally opening it to yourself. You begin to understand that peace is not distant or unattainable. It is something you craft through daily choices, through the conversations you allow, the people you keep close, the energy you invest, and the boundaries you honor. You begin moving with intention, presence, and awareness of your own intrinsic value. You begin to understand with a clarity that grows quietly but insistently that you don't need anyone's permission to protect your mental and emotional stability. You don't need approval to say no. You don't need validation to walk away. You don't need to justify the choices that safeguard your well-being, because your peace is not negotiable. Each decision you make in service of yourself is a declaration of your worth, a gentle but unwavering assertion that your life and heart matter. And slowly, with each mindful breath, you begin to construct a life that truly belongs to you, not borrowed from someone else's expectations, not shaped by fear, not held together by exhaustion or compromise. A life where you are no longer a supporting character in someone else's story, but the author of your own narrative. A life where your heart is not a battlefield to survive, but a sanctuary to inhabit. A life where the relationships you cultivate are rooted in reciprocity, mutual respect, genuine effort, and a presence that is felt and honored. As you step forward from this place, carry this with you, not as a warning or reminder, but as a promise to yourself. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to honor your worth. You are allowed to choose yourself without hesitation, without guilt, without apology. You are allowed to design a life that mirrors the depth, strength, and integrity of the person you are becoming. And perhaps this is the beginning of a gentler, wiser, more grounded version of yourself. The version who finally comprehends that self-respect is not a destination to arrive at, but a practice to cultivate every single day. That inner peace is not a rare miracle to stumble upon, but a discipline, a practice, a rhythm that begins and ends with the way you hold yourself, tenderly, firmly, intentionally. This is the life where you no longer surrender your energy to those who cannot see its value. The life where you create boundaries, not as walls, but as bridges, to the people, experiences, and spaces that deserve your presence. The life where your heart feels expansive, not depleted, whole, not scattered. The life where your choices echo the truth of who you are and the love you are capable of giving, starting with yourself. And maybe, just maybe, this is the moment you realize that choosing yourself is not selfish. It is the ultimate act of courage, the highest form of love, and the foundation for everything meaningful that is yet to come.